afternoon. It is your turn on News Talk, 1430 KASI. Brent Rice here until 2 o'clock. The phone numbers for your use, 515-232-1430, pound 1430. If you are a U.S. cellular customer, you can email me. Hit me online. That's easy. Brent Rice at 1430KASI.com. Thanks for hanging out with us, and we hope you'll stay until 2 o'clock joining us. On the Newsmaker line right now, Iowa State University political science professor Stephen Schmidt. Professor, good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
And thanks for taking the time. You know we always appreciate it.
My pleasure.
So we'll talk about a couple of things. First of all, let's talk about the one thing that topped news on CNN just a few minutes ago, and that was the effort that is afoot by House Republicans to begin the process of repealing the president's health care legislation. Most think this doesn't really have a chance of succeeding. Most think that there may be the votes in the House to turn the thing back. There may be the votes, but the votes aren't there in the Senate. The president obviously holds the veto, but some, including Iowa's 5th District Congressman Steve King, have said, you know what, we can find some procedural ways to just not fund it. We may not be able to turn the law aside. We just will make sure that there's no way to actually make sure the thing has any funding going forward. First of all, your thoughts on they're not gonna have the votes to turn this thing aside, right?
Well, can we go back one step further?
Sure.
All right, because I think you understand this, and some of our listeners do, but some may not. The Republicans, especially the conservatives, what we generally call sort of the Tea Party group, thinks they got elected partly or largely because they said they were going to kill Obamacare. Since the shootings in Arizona, they don't use the word job killing and kill the bill anymore, but what they're trying to do is fulfill what they think is a promise that they made. They don't like the bill. It's big government. It's socialism. Saw Ron Paul talking this morning about how he wants market forces to drive healthcare and so on. And so they have to basically go after Obamacare, as they call it, and vote to do various things to it. One, to kill it, which, as you said, the House very likely can get enough votes to basically repeal the health care bill. In the Senate, Steve King is thinking that he can get some Democrats who are going to have to run for the Senate in 2 years to switch over and vote with the Republicans in the Senate, in which case they might be able to pass it, but I'm not sure that that's going to happen. And then they can spend a lot of time on procedural, basically activities that will defund parts of healthcare and so on. And all of that can and all of it will happen. So I see healthcare reform politics, as I call it, proceeding for maybe much of this year or much of this legislative session, because there is that political component to it. The other thing that's happening over there on the sidelines is that the poll numbers of approval for generally the healthcare reform law have been rising, have been going up. And a lot of Americans now, for example, already can put their kids or will be able to put their kids on up to, I think, age 26 on their own health insurance policy. And those folks are delighted because a lot of those kids aren't finding jobs in this economy right now, and at least they're covered by health care, so there's a little comfort in that. And so I think the Republicans are going to have to carefully measure going forward as they proceed to try to change or dismantle or paralyze the health care reform law, because it's not very clear to me that in the end there is going to be this enormous amount of political capital to be gained from them doing that. But you see, there are all these steps and stages along the way, and the first one is they have to fulfill their promise.
Well, and I understand the whole fulfilling the promise. A lot of these folks, as you mentioned at the outset, got elected simply by saying, I'm going to do everything in my power to, and so on and so on. I mean, I understand all of that, but how much political, and you mentioned it, but how much political capital are these folks going to be willing to expend for an effort that ultimately, even if it gets through the House, even if it gets through the Senate, it'll get as far as the president, he'll slap a big old veto on it. The president's writing some pretty good 5 these days. I mean, his poll numbers are up. How much political capital are they willing to spend to refight a fight that we fought a year ago?
A lot. And not all Republicans, but there is a hardcore insurgent, maverick core of Republicans who really think that this is a good battle to fight, a good stand to take, that it will resonate with their constituency, with folks out there in the United States who feel the same way as they do. And so in some instances, they're not going to care what Democrats think, okay? They don't care what Democratic voters think. They don't care what Kucinich thinks or what liberal Democrats think. They may not even care what no-party independents think about this at this point in the game. And they probably, in the opening shots of this battle, may not care what establishment Republicans and establishment Republicans leaders think, okay?
But how much of this then is okay? We said we're going to fight the fight because that's what we said we're going to do. But aren't there, or maybe this is just kind of the depths of politics we have these days? Because to me, what this sets up as is a big. Everybody's looking now at 2012. Everybody's looking not only at House and Senate races in 2012, but obviously everybody's looking at the battle for the presidency in 2012. And how much of this is just, conservative, so-called Tea Party Republicans in the House, just kind of keeping their street cred up?
Okay. I didn't come down to the studio today because I didn't want to have to smack you upside the head right now. So I can't do that. So I'm going to do it verbally, all right? If you're Steve King, this is a good issue for you. Apparently in his district, they don't like Obama. They don't like this health care reform law. And Steve King can go after it for 2 years. And at the end, he can say, I got betrayed by my own Republicans. They didn't stick with it the way I did. And by golly, I stuck with it. And so for many Republicans, it's a pretty good issue. And they're not going to necessarily give it up. On the other hand, I think where you are correct and where I would give you the attaboys and, share my honest iced tea drink here with you.
After the smack of the head.
After the smack of the head would be to say that there are these other issues that are also going to be coming up over the next months that the House Republican majority is going to have to deal with. They can't spend the entire next 2 years, dealing with Obamacare. And so at what point are they going to start seeing people peeling off and taking a fork in the road and going in some other direction on other types of issues that, protecting the Second Amendment rights and, dealing with all kinds of other stuff, trade with China and who knows, God forbid, what other thing might lurk out there and come and bite us, and then Congress will have to divert its attention to that. But so what I'm saying is, think of this as a soap opera or as a serial TV program or novel or whatever, where you have to read it chapter by chapter. And chapter 1 is we're going to take on Obamacare and healthcare reform, and this is the thing that we're going to stick the wooden stake in the heart and put the garlic on it and get out a cross and stick it on its forehead, because that's how they had painted, the healthcare reform bill. But then, chapter 2, something else may happen. Chapter 3, something else. And the dealing with healthcare reform may morph into all kinds of different things, and the leadership in the House is probably not going to want to expend all of its capital or shoot all of its ammunition on that one. I'm sure of that.
Right.
And so that's where this thing is going to be going. We can watch it week after week and see at what point it waters down, and you have the struggling band of diehards who are still, keeping their powder dry on this, and the others have marched on to other battlefields.
Professor, we need to take a break. When we come back, I want to talk about the other big news of the day, and that is you mentioned China and trade relations with China. China's president is in the country. We're going to
Who?
Exactly. There was an Abbott and Costello's.
Oh, China's president.
Rung up right there.
That's right.
Talk about who.
Who?
And the rest of the Chinese trade delegation in town. Big state dinner going to happen tonight. We'll talk about that after the break. It is your turn right here on 1430 KASI.
Steve here from Brown.